Gene that speak tonight, and Gene's family, and he'll talk about it, moved to Liberty Township in the 40s, late 40s, I think, and his father was a minister and a builder, and Gene and his dad built an addition onto my family's home in, I think, around 1950, somewhere in there. And then Dorothy was our next door neighbor, and her mom and dad moved to Liberty Township in about the mid-30s sometime in there. And so they were awesome neighbors. Her dad, he could fix any lawnmower in the world, and it was just a great relationship. And her mom was an awesome cook too. So I really appreciate you coming tonight, all of you, and looking forward to hearing this. Okay.
Okay, Donnie had mentioned that I talk about my family, and first I think I need to start with Dorothy's family. Her father, Robert, came to Liberty Township, the best we can tell, was in 1924. At that time, he was not married. He had just finished mechanic school in Kansas City. And so he was living in a house that was on the corner of 747 and Route 4. It was off on the west side, south of the corner. The building is no longer there. That's where the filling station is now. And I don't know if those people who remember the Alpine Cheese House. Prior to the Alpine Cheese House, that was his garage, where he did mechanical work and pump gas. He also had a bus, school bus. At that time, Liberty Township did not own school buses. People owned them, they contracted to drive for the school. So he did that till he stayed there 24 to 29. And then married Ethel Eaton, who at that time her name was Ethel Winterstein. And so they lived in Hamilton for 1 year. And then in 1930, they moved back to Liberty Township. And they lived at the Route 747 Route 4, except it was on the northeast corner. It used to be a very large house. Her name was Hattie Frederick. And she'd been there a long time, so they rented there. And then Dorothy came along somewhere in that area, about 33 or so. But at that time then, he had a different garage at the corner of Liberty Fairfield and Route 4. There used to be a bar there called the Log Cabin Bar. Well, prior to that, there was a building around the corner, and he had a garage there. Also still had his school bus, which he operated until I think, about the late 40s or somewhere. The school bought their own school buses, and he also used the school bus. The manufacturing company saw him out. I don't know if people remember that place. It's an asbestos manufacturer. And he hauled their employees back and forth to Hamilton. And so they purchased the property at 5695 Princeton Glendale Road in 19 and that's it. We get all these numbers right.
36.
Okay.
35.
When did you buy it, Dorothy?
1935, I think.
1935 we bought the property. It was in pretty bad repair. The barn had slipped down the hill a little ways.
And this was where? I'm sorry.
At 5695 Princeton. If you're coming south of Route 747, there used to be a little sign when you go down in the dip at Culver, it said Mousetown. It was right there on the west side of the road. So they bought that property, and the Depression was still lasting, and so they raised chicken, they raised cattle, they had bees, they raised vegetable gardens, they had milk cows, and this was the way they supplemented their income in addition to the school bus. And so they lived in that house until 1948, and they bought a piece of little ground, a half acre from Donnie's parents, next door to them, and built a little national home.
And that is where?
That is 5705 Princeton Glendale. And the national home at that time, right after the Second World War ended, there was a means of houses for veterans coming home. They were very small houses. Who knows how many they made? Everywhere you go out there, wherever you go in this country, there's national homes. And so they lived there until they both passed away. And I think he died, what year, Dorothy?
I think it was 95.
95, or 95.
98.
And he was 95 when he passed away. And she was 99 and a half.
Like 2 months.
I never had to get that. So at that point in time, prior to this, we had set up trust funds for them. And so once they both passed away, Dorothy is the trustee and still is the trustee. And so we sold the little house that we bought that they had built in 5705 a year ago. We currently have the other 48 acres for sale. Thought we had it sold 2 years ago when the market was this way, and so we're still working on that. So anyway, they lived there, and after they built the little house and moved over next door to it, the house was empty, and Jim Ramsey and Melba Ramsey, Jim was a returning veteran who'd been wounded, and he asked Mr. Eaton, he says, could I live in the house until I get a new house built? And he was building a house on Milliken Road off of the Gorsuch farm, which was Ralph and, well, the Gorsuch farm. And so as soon as they got their house finished and moved out, my father approached Mr. Eaton and he says, I have a son that needs to get out of Cincinnati and wonder if you'll rent to him. So in 1950, the Muncy family started moving into this house. So then we'll follow up with that in a little while. The Muncy family, my father, James A. and Susie Young Muncy, they were both born in the late 1800s in Leicester County, Kentucky. They were married in 1906 in Kentucky. And during their marriage and raising families, I think my father wanted to be a missionary, but there was a small problem, and it's called children. So anyway, during his life and his work, we lived in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Illinois, Tennessee, and then in 1948, when he retired, we moved to Liberty Township with 4 children still at home. They were the parents of 12 boys and 3 girls.
Why did he move to Liberty Township? Why?
Well, I had many of my brothers and sisters lived in the Cincinnati, and one sister lived in Liberty Township. Her name was May Hornsby, Delbert Hornsby. And they first rented a house on Milliken Road, and then they rented a little house across from Frank Mouse's garage. And so while we were building our house up here, we lived with them, which was quite obviously very crowded. But from that family starting, today it numbers over 600 people, starting from my parents, scattered all over the countryside. But he was a school teacher, a carpenter, a minister, and just before he retired, since he had an experience with a lot of children, the church that he was associated with wanted him to head up an orphanage for him. And so during that period of time, he had at one time 500 orphan children. Came from all over the United States. And so he stayed on that till 1948 when he retired and we moved up here.
Where was that orphanage?
It was in Cleveland, Tennessee. And, there was 4 homes in that town. One was a very large home for boys. On there, they had dairy cattle, they had beef cattle, they had hogs, they had chickens. I think there was rabbits too. They farmed the property, dairy replacing all of that in order to make this somewhat self-sufficient. Then there was another farm where it was strictly beef cattle. And then there was 2 homes for children in town.